Thanks for joining us, and welcome back to the Watchman on the Wall podcast. Periodically, we'll bring you true stories of angelic encounters, heavenly visitations, near-death experiences, as well as modern-day prophecies that are relevant to us today. When we come back, we'll begin our next episode. Hello again, and welcome back. This week we have a different kind of a show. It's more of a financial show, but deals with prophecy as well. And we've had these shows in the past about the crash of the dollar and the financial problems that are coming, looks like it's going to come upon this country. But I heard an interesting podcast by Stan Johnson this past week with his guest, Terry Saka of Cornerstone Asset Metals. He and Terry talk about some of the world news on financial matters that you won't hear in the mainstream media. I think you'll find this very enlightening, along with some of the prophecies he talks about that deal with the financial crash. So here now is Stan Johnson with his guest, Terry Saka from Cornerstone Asset Metals.
I've got Terry Saka of Cornerstone Asset Metals on the phone today. We're going to talk about the finances. As I'm reading here from HalTurnerRadioShow.com, this is the headline: U.S. Treasury plan. If economic collapse, force majeure, paratroopers to Federal Reserve banks to demonetize the U.S. dollar. Now, before I get into that, let me give you a disclaimer. We're not telling you to buy any kind of precious metal. We are discussing a Bible prophecy here in light of these different things going on. I also want to remind you that Lindsey Williams was told by his elite friend that if it's written on paper, it's worth the paper it's written on, meaning nothing. All of the elite, all they deal in is gold and silver. Now let me read the article here, about 6-8 paragraphs, then I turn it over to Terry. Did you know the United States of America actually has a plan in the event they can no longer service their debt? They do. Adopted back in the early 2000s, it's called Meet the 6900 Protocols. It would start with the Secretary of Treasury declaring a force majeure, preventing the United States of America from servicing its debt. This would immediately be interpreted by the marketplaces as a de facto repudiation of U.S. debt. They even know precisely what time they would make such a declaration, 11:38 a.m. Eastern Time. That's because at 11:38 a.m., markets in Asia and Europe will be closed, leaving only U.S. markets operating for a few more hours. A few seconds after that announcement was made, all U.S. markets, both equities, debt, and commodities, i.e. stocks, bonds, commodities, that have trading limits or permissible daily limits would all be limit offered with pools. Again, I don't understand all of this. I'm going to turn it over to Terry in a second here. Limit offered means that there are more sellers at the limit, i.e. limit down, than there are buyers. So-called pools would immediately begin to form, probably 1,000 contracts every few minutes. Limit offered with pools, this is a trader language, pools to sell 2,000 lots, 3,000 lots. That means the number of sellers over and above the available buyers at the limit offered price that would begin to build. By 1 p.m., the news would begin to sink in because it would take a while for the panic selling would arise from the public. This news is being released at lunch hour. Most of the American people initially would not even understand the horror of the news. But you would see professional selling first, and as the professional selling intensified over the afternoon, the SEC, the CFTC, NASDAQ, and various market regulatory authorities would begin to institute certain emergency market protocols. This would be the installation of the so-called, quote, declaration of the fast market conditions. For instance, the declaration of, quote, no more stop orders, the declaration of, quote, fill at any price is set in a desperate bid to maintain liquidity. That first day, the Dow Jones Industrial Average and related indices on a percentage basis would lose 20 to 30% of their value by the close of business that day. Now, again, I don't understand all of this, but I'll turn it over to Terry because I don't want anybody to get hurt. As I told you guys, I think it was December 9th of last year, I felt the Lord speak to my heart, said that there is a stock market crash coming, and anything you don't want to lose, put it in silver. So I immediately got some silver, and since then, here, I guess just a couple of days ago, I just ordered some more, and it just arrived, again, from CornerstoneAssetMetals.com. Okay, so Terry, explain to us what's going on with this thing.
Well, what that is a government protocol to prepare for an event, maybe like World War III or possibly economic collapse or just something that will bring a shock to the system. The downside to it is right now in America, we're in a high. We're running almost 13 years now of an economic expansion. It's completely unrealistic. It's all based on money printing. And what I like to give it the definition of when they say no stop losses and all that trader language, I like to put it in Montana terms. It's like 10,000 cattle trying to fit through a single gate. The bottom line is we're going to get really burned. And what's concerning for most Americans right now, that I have anyway, they're at extreme, I'm talking record level margin debt, meaning a lot of Americans right now are borrowing money in the stock account. So if they have 50,000 in their stock account, they're borrowing an additional 50,000 to go into the stock market. That's at the highest level, Stan, that we've ever seen. And that margin debt is going to be panic selling when the time comes. So if and when this type of event takes place, and people are in that extreme level of investment into the stock market, they will lose substantial amounts. So that being said, this is merely a protocol, like I said, for economic collapse or world war, but they're preparing. And they know it's coming. I keep contending on my TV program that this is something they know is coming. This is part of the Great Reset. And I could probably sum it up the best like this, because this is what is most important for all of us to know. The reckoning day is coming, whether we want to accept it or not. I know you speak a lot about these things that are getting ready to hit, but I know on the financial, the reckoning is there. What has happened kind of in the interim since really about 2001, since we really had the initial shock and all, is a dynamic global economic deterioration. This economic deterioration, Stan, is upon the United States, but it's rampant deficit spending. And we have gone beyond deficit spending that was enacted by Congress, is not localized. It's not really just us. This is, in fact, really a global issue. It's been multiple trillions globally. We now have a planet that is sinking into the sea of all of this debt and red ink. It is all going down at the same time. The concern, and well, to me, that's the support value for why the Great Reset has to be ushered in. So to give a lot of people a little bit of background, starting in 2008, we all know that we had the supposed Great Recession, which was really beyond that. It was almost like a Great Depression. But the United States was consuming, and this is the key, we were consuming 80% of the entire world's savings to finance our debt. And at some point after 2008, the collapse, the U.S. began to need more than the entire world had to lend. So that's one of the biggest factors people need to understand. Now, when we talk about the U.S. Federal Reserve monetizing our debt, meaning they print it out of thin air and then they say, then therefore here it is, it dilutes our buying power, hence why we're seeing extraordinary inflation. But the digits are they're just digits in a computer. That's all it is. Money is created out of thin air to buy these treasury bonds. But here is the big one. When I say they're using the world's savings, we've done this before when we fooled the Arabs in the gold back in the 70s. But we're taking the world's ability to buy our debt. So we're bringing the problem to head here, and the issue is the issue of the central banks globally. And I'm talking like Germany, Japan, Saudi Arabia. They're no longer powerhouses like people think. Their reserves that they used to have in savings per se have been substantially depleted. They can now basically, well, nowadays, but what we know is they're no longer able to hide it. In fact, they own a certain number, we know, likely in the trillions. And this is why people are going to be really angry at America if this happens. They own likely trillions of dollars of U.S. Treasury debt. And here's the kicker. It's not being serviced. So they can't hide the fact because their reserves are depleted. Meaning we've basically gone around as the United States and we've shaken down the world saying, hey, how about you give me $50? How about you give me another, 50 billion? And we keep using their savings to buy our treasury notes that could literally go to zero, bankrupting the world. And you want to talk about a world being angry. That's the bigger factor here. What Americans don't realize, Stan, is we've been living off of borrowed money from the world. They've been putting their extra savings, their hedge funds or their sovereign wealth funds or their government reserve funds, buying U.S. treasuries because, well, America was always good for it. And so if we get a condition, which I contend is being orchestrated, and they implement this kind of extreme policy, you're going to see, it's probably World War III at that point, but it is going to get incredibly ugly because we will have zapped the world's finances and the world's savings, and they're not going to take it very well.
Well, there's been several prophecies that have come forward that says this kind of, and this is basically what it's saying, is that the whole stock market would basically collapse or lose 20 or 30% of its value in one day. And those kind of prophecies out there exist. But everybody wants to know just how close could it be? Could it happen this year?
Well, it's already, the hard part is it's actually already happening in very incremental ways. For an example, I know the Hal Turner show put this up, and they're fantastic for this, but it wasn't too long ago. Somebody put a strong arm on the Great Britain and demanded payment in gold bullion. Now, this is underneath the table. This was hush hush, but the information's out there. There has been demands already saying, no, I'll take that in gold instead, please. And I know from my industry, the amount of gold and silver that is being moved around the world and consumed by sovereign wealth is extraordinary. So there's definitely stuff happening right now. And my impression, and I'm not so sure it leads to this extreme like in this policy, but there is definitely a collapse being orchestrated to usher in this great reset, which I was out on my last week. The Great Reset actually is AKA the new world, the one world order, because they have already made claims that they will turn all the central banks over to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. We as Christians know that as centralized finance controlling the world. These are technocrats. These are Luciferian technocrats that are not elected. And then they'll take it to a central government, I imagine, at some point too. But in the financial realm, they have already been making plans to turn over central bank authority to the IMF. Now, I'm not exactly sure they get away with this, mind you. I think this is a really big overhaul. They need to do it. The system is collapsing. The bond market is in deep trouble. Nobody's buying the debt anymore. So they're making up a currency out of thin air to buy the bonds, to swap the bonds, to make currency, to swap currency. And it's all a big smoke and mirror right now. And there is no resolution. It cannot be. The fact it can't be fixed is huge. And that's why we as Americans need to be prepared. Now, in the timeline, I assume the Great Reset is around, from my indications, somewhere around 2 years, maybe into the 3 years, but it can happen at any time. And the reason I say that, they're focusing more on creating central bank digital currencies. And then I think they run it through a central authority like the IMF, but they try to take it cashless. Thing is, we're not ready for cashless yet. We're not. And Americans, we've been pretty duped with this whole shamdemic and what they've been trying to do with this virus that this biovirus that leaked out, or if it leaked out at all. But the point is, they're using this whole thing to condition us. And there is a lot more to the lockdown and mask wearing than people realize, and has nothing to do with lockdown and masks. I think it's conditioning of getting ready to introduce this great reset, which is a financial control system that also puts the pressure in what we have seen on the middle class in America. That has been the biggest destruction of this virus shamdemic, in my opinion, because they have taken out probably the estimates of 40% of small businesses have permanently shut down. And that is going at the heart of middle class America, which is the heart of what the wealth engine of America is.
We'll be right back after this message. Hello again, this is The Watchman. Please join us each week for an exciting and inspirational podcast dealing with angel encounters, heavenly visitations, near-death experiences, as well as modern-day prophecies that are relevant to us today. So tune in each week and share it with your friends. After all, they could use a little inspiration in their life, too. That's the Watchman on the Wall podcast, and now you can find us on YouTube. We return you now to Stan Johnson and his guest, Terry Saka.
Probably most of our listeners are probably not invested in the stock market, but most of our listeners are wanting to know what could cause this. Let me read this prophecy from Pastor Shane Warren. He says, "Then the scene changed to a news report on the eye of the storm. The wind was blowing violently, and he said, 'This is amazing. This is not a natural storm. It's raining.' And he reached down and picked up a fist of dollar bills. He says, 'It's raining dollar bills. It's almost like they're worthless. They're worthless.' It was raining worthless dollars." Now, when I see the stock market hit 30,000, like you said, this is crazy. Okay, so it can't keep going.
No, and it's all based, I have the charts, I have the data. It's all been pure money printing. As they have been printing currency and putting it into the banking system and bailing out the banks in the repo market, they have been artificially inflating this stock market. It's very important for people to know that. And I'm glad to hear most listeners will not be in the market. My concern is a lot of them may not with free cash, but a lot of them probably are with IRAs or retirement accounts. Then those are important to be protected if they do have them in the market. But it is vital, because this is all smoke and mirrors. The only reason the market's been going up the last couple of years has been money printing and stimulus and bailouts. And you can see the chart, the correlation of the S&P going up only is correlated to how much money is put into the system. And when you see how much the central bank, U.S. central bank, has taken on in debt, it's unbelievable in the trillions. And they're talking about, listen to what they're doing now. They're talking about proposing multiple trillions more in bailouts and stimulus. They're now doing tax credits for people and children, and this welfare state of paying people not to work has destroyed our businesses in the United States. Even in our industry, we're struggling to get people to work at $20 and $25 an hour. That makes no sense. I personally think this is the greatest opportunity in the world for people that want to get a job, because you could probably move up to management pretty quick. Upward mobility is there. But we're experiencing a condition, I believe Cloward Piven, I believe other things, by design, to destroy the concept of work, which we know in the Bible, if we're lazy and we don't work, we don't eat. but they want to destroy the idea of work, put people on the socialized welfare system, so then they can create this disaster that we're talking about to then usher in the ultimate control grid, which would be the Great Reset, a global socialist order. Heck, I'd be gone as far as to say it's the Fourth Reich, the rising of a global national socialist order. And I really believe that that's playing out. So this is a big deal, and I think it's so close, Stan. So when we ask, and the listeners want to ask, well, what about the timeline? That's very difficult, because you got to remember, we're also staring down audits that are proving that this election will, and I think it's going to prove overwhelmingly that this election was probably rigged and stolen. And wait until those fireworks come out. And then what are the Chinese and the Russians? How are they going to react? We are at a point in history, we don't know when the ball's going to drop. All I know is smart money and big money is definitely hedging away from the system, and they're extremely into the alternative tangible assets. And obviously one of the biggest ones would be gold, and silver is a real big one. That's why there's issues in the supply chain.
Leslie had a dream, July 25th, 2010. I'm not going to read all of it. I read it several times. They probably are familiar with it. But she saw fish jumping in our boat, meaning they were turning to Jesus. But they were skinned, like chickens with the skin peeled off. And she says, quote, "The reason the fish look like a skinned cat is because that is exactly what happened to them financially. They had all other wealth, protection, and cover and life stripped away. It showed their nakedness." Now, what everybody listening wants to do is not be caught up in that. We don't want to find ourselves in a desperate situation, and obviously that's kind of your expertise. So what do you suggest for a bunch of good Christian prophecy students that don't want to be caught with all the terrors out there, all of the wealth all gone, all in a day or two maybe? What do they do?
Well, I mean, diversification is very important, but, I would definitely be having, emergency food storage, tangible assets that you can barter or trade with. Obviously, physical silver, physical gold, depending on the amount of money you need to protect, is paramount right now, especially having it in your hands. If it's in a retirement account, you can easily do it and put it into a deposit or in a retirement account, physical gold and silver as well. I think that's just paramount. And then if you're going to remain in a market system of any kind, just be hedged to the downside. One thing that's unique, Stan, that indicates what we're saying isn't just hype. There's a fascinating piece, and it's going along around the whole world, so it's not just in America. But BlackRock, which is a major hedge fund financial institution, is buying up billions every month of homes in America, especially in Texas. They bought out a whole neighborhood. They're buying up small businesses. They're buying up houses. And people ask, well, why would they do that? Are they just trying to make some money? I say no. If you see what the agenda of the Great Reset is, it's to control real estate, control small business, make us slaves to the system so we do what they say or we become disconnected from society. Why else would they be doing it? Now, it's not just BlackRock doing it. They're bidding literally 30-40% above the bid to take the home away from a middle-class family that's trying to buy the house. And it's not just happening in small amounts. It's happening all over the country, and it's happening all over the world. So it tells me there's a coordinated effort to make sure people become renters. They don't have the ability to produce wealth, and then therefore they have to fall under this national socialist control grid. And when you start connecting all of those dots, you'll become very concerned, if anything, to get your home in order, your house in order. Make sure you have physical silver, physical gold, other tangible assets if you can, land, farmland, anything that's barterable. Obviously, food supply and water is good, just so you can sleep at night, because this is that unpredictable.
So, if they want some advice, do you guys give advice, or do you just offer gold, silver, palladium, and what was the other fourth metal?
Oh, yeah,
and
rhodium.
How do they get a hold of you?
Well, I would definitely make contact, go to cornerstoneassetmetals.com. I would register for information. You could always call us, we're at 888-747-3309. There are definitely representatives that are extremely skilled. I mean, a lot of them went to Bible school. We all went to Bible school together. A really solid group of people, very, very knowledgeable in diversifying into tangible assets, very knowledgeable in helping in retirement accounts. They will help walk you through the process of getting physical delivered to you. Or if you just have general questions about other things, they're going to have a pretty strong opinion on what's going on. Because I guess if anything, Stan, is we're not being dealt legitimate information. A lot of what we're being told is extremely dishonest and misleading. So if anything, what we do at Cornerstone is we offer an opinion of what really is going on in the market system so you can then make better judgments. And I think that's always a good place to start.
So if they want to get a hold of you, if they want to get some gold or silver, and of course, let me remind them, Shane Warren said he heard the audible voice of God say that silver is going to skyrocket far more than gold. As a matter of fact, that brings me to another question. I got an email that was sent to me about a lady that says that silver is going to reach $600 an ounce. Your comment on
that? I know who she is. She's incredibly intelligent, and she's not far off at all. I will not be surprised. I mean, I'm anticipating anywhere from $300 to $600 and easily, because once it breaks the $50 an ounce price, they're going to be out of the short manipulation, and they're going to make money when the price rises. So they're going to make sure it rises really high. And I know she understands that aspect of it. Here's kind of putting something in context, Stan. And this is serious. When I was telling you about England having gold demands and being hush-hush, the amount of gold and silver bullion and cash money that was abruptly removed from the United Kingdom in April of this year, they shipped it to Doha, Qatar. Shipping it to Qatar without any explanation. Someone and entities out there in this world are putting tremendous demands on Western banks because they see the US dollar is in serious, gigantic trouble. That's the kind of stuff you don't get in the media that we see in the industry. That's very serious. And so if they're going to get involved, it's best to probably take action sooner than later, because there's some time delays and there's going to be a supply issue in the future.
Okay, so if they have questions, how do they get a hold of you, and what do they do? What do you recommend?
Definitely make contact with us. Go to cornerstoneassetmetals.com, register, and we will have a representative contact you as soon as we can. You could always call at the 888-747-3309. We are definitely here to do everything we can to answer your questions and concerns. And one thing it's important to note is I don't want anyone to feel fearful. You know, the Lord said, I did not give you a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. What we want to do is just recognize that we are being prepared. We are preparing to protect what God has already entrusted in our hands. And I think if we do it the right way, as I love when Job 27 kind of speaks out, the wicked had trust in a money system. They take control of all of the money. Back in the day, they took control of physical silver. Now it's paper currency. We in the kingdom get ourselves into actual silver, which God gave us dominion over things of the earth, Haggai 2:8. I really believe we get rewarded in a wealth transfer from the wicked to the innocent, because the wealthy no longer hoard the right money known as silver. They hoard paper currency. And I think that's the key for us in the kingdom to do. And so best to get a hold of us, start the conversation, and see how best we can help guide you through some of the questions you have.
I'm going to say this on air, what I said to you, I think it was the day before yesterday. And that is, thank you, Terry. You've been a good friend. You've been a good supporter. I love the fact that you're honest and you're interested in helping. As a matter of fact, as I said, I know that your heart is good and your heart is to win souls, not just to make money. And so thank you. Thank you for all you do.
Oh, God bless you, Stan. That's so kind. I'm very thankful for you too, because, God when he hammered me with the whole idea of Cornerstone, he said, make it very, in the dreams I had, made it very clear, get my people ready. I didn't know it was going to take this many years, but it has been a handful of years. I understand now God moves at a different pace, but I appreciate it because I've been hollering pretty loud to ministries to get ready because something is wrong and the world is waking up. And when they wake up, we, the people, are the ones who are going to be, have the consequence, and we don't need that.
Amen. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you so much for coming on.
God bless you, Stan. All of you. Thank you.
All right. So what do? I'm not going to tell you to buy anything, but I'm going to tell you that everybody needs to be thinking back through that same scenario I've been saying on the radio now for a long time. So there's a virus out there, there's hoodlums out there, or there's a militia out there, or there's a curfew, you can't come out of your home, and let's say it lasts a year. So do you have the ability to stay in your home, food, water, protection, metals, precious metals, gold, silver? Do you have you thought it through? Can I stay in the four walls of my home for a year, or do I need to get something? And the Lord told Leslie to tell people that they should prepare, but also that no one can prepare for every eventuality, meaning do what you can, my brothers and sisters. Do what you can. What you can't, then, we don't want to do nothing and then say, I'm just going to trust the Lord. And he says, well, no, I've told you to prepare. You should have prepared. So that's the wisdom for today.
Hello again, this is The Watchman. Please join us on our new video channel called Encounters from Beyond the Veil. It's the same exciting content as our audio podcast, but in a shorter, but yet a video format. Also, please subscribe so you won't miss any of our episodes. That's Encounters from Beyond the Veil, exclusively found on YouTube. Well, thanks again for listening. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with your friends. Also, give us a like. We welcome any comments or suggestions you might have. We also ask you to subscribe so that you will be notified of all our future episodes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time on the Watchman on the Wall podcast.